What is going? I've started the show 3 times now, and it is just lagging like crazy. I have no idea why. There's not even anybody home. Give me a second. Let me watch, see if it's catching up at all. I think this is better. That's really weird. I didn't change any of my settings or anything on my program since last week, but for some reason, I think we're okay now. The joys of technology. Okay. Hey, Chris. I got your message, Chris, just to let you know. And it's kind of funny because somebody else tagged me in that the John Christ VR church video, and a guy actually responded, and he does a VR church. Like, legitimately does that thing. Like, so it was really awkward. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, probably better. So let's try this for the third time. Episode 27, Theology Nights, is Friday night. Merry Christmas, everyone. Myself, Rory, Tiger, we are here, and we are ready to talk about the book of Titus. I better get all my words in right now. John, you're probably right, because it's 3 days until Christmas. There's only so much interwebs to go around to everybody. And everybody's online shopping to try to get their gifts in, so we don't have enough interwebs for the Theology Nights. But anyways, we will try our best. I'm going to get as much in as I can. As I apologize. If you've been joining now, this is the third time we're trying to get the show going. But we're going to rock and roll as much as we can. So, episode 27, Theology Nights. We have 3 Friday night shows left, and as you have seen, hopefully, we are moving to Tuesday nights. Let's see, what date is that? It's January 8th. Starting January 8th. Hello, Miss Robbie. January 8th, we are moving to Tuesday nights. Multitude of reasons, and I'll save those because I believe everybody read the blog post about it. But real quick, January 8th, we're moving to Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., same place, theologynights.com, same Facebook page, everything that way. Friday, January 4th is our last Friday night show. But we have so much. Please go read the blog article. There's just so much excitement coming for 2019. I'm not a New Year's resolution kind of guy. However, this year, as 2018 ends and 2019 starts, I am so excited for what we have coming up. There are so many different things in the works, and as I began to say this, I told some people, this is a new thing. This is something that I've really wanted to do. My goal with Theology Nights was to make it something that everybody just knows about in our community, in our immediate community, and via the internet and our groups and things like that. So with the local community, with the Northeast Ohio area, starting February 7th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at Boardman Library, we will begin our monthly lecture series, which I am really excited about. The goal behind these is to first off, I want to invite pastors, and I want to invite people from churches that might not know about the ministry online. I really want to be intentional about inviting them to come to these events so they can learn about what we do online. But we're actually going to do public lectures. I'm going to talk about this first series that I'm going to do. We're going to do a series on the 5 solas and why the Reformation is not over. We'll be talking about the doctrine of sola scriptura. Rory is now eating. What is Rory eating? He's eating a glove. When Christine's gone, Mom's gone, so the kids are just going nuts. Seriously, he's eating a glove. Every night that they come down here, it's the funniest thing because they will be perfect until I start talking to the microphone, and then now they're fighting. Rory is ready to square off with Tiger, but that's kind of funny because Tiger is normally the one that squares off with Rory. Anyways, it's just crazy. 4th time we're trying to do the show. Anyways, so if you are in the Boardman, Ohio, Northeast Ohio area, I will be posting flyers, but February 7th, 6:30 to 8 p.m., Boardman Library in their large meeting room. The first part of a series that I am doing on the 5 solas and why the Reformation is not over. I would love for you to join me if you're in the area. What we're going to do is at the beginning, I'll do a quick 5 to 10 minute like an overview of what Theology Nights is to let the public know. I think the thing that we're running into right now is a lot of Christians in our area, let me speak specifically to our Northeast Ohio area. A lot of Christians in our area just don't really know where to go to get good resources. I think that's the problem. We're kind of stuck in this cycle of just frankly bad disciples that are being produced, and they're under this really this poor theological umbrella. And if you're stuck under that umbrella and you're sharing that with your friends, then you're just kind of like in this bad cycle. And so for the last couple of weeks, I've really been thinking like, okay, I know that not everyone is going to go online to get their theology, and I understand that we need to have that one-on-one connection. I get that, absolutely. So I think with moving forward, doing these monthly lectures to talk to the community around us about what Theology Nights is, explain to them that, listen, like, we have a live show, we have a podcast, we have articles, we have a reference page, we have legit articles that you can trust, and the resources that are being recommended. Like, listen, like, I have like really, really big plans for Theology Nights and stuff that I'm really praying through and working through right now. But just moving forward, just know that there's a lot of big stuff coming in. So the first step with that is I really, as I've been praying about what I can do to impact our community immediately, I've really been praying about how I can get involved more and just kind of realize that maybe just start teaching. And so February 7th, 6:30 to 8 p.m. at Boardman Library, I am starting a series called The Five Solas and Why the Reformation is Not Over. The first part, we will be talking about the doctrine of sola scriptura. After that, we will just kind of meet every month. I'm going to rotate through our areas of the library. Like they were really cool about it. Now, I have to say this because I'm talking about them. They do not endorse or agree or support or promote what I am doing. They are just allowing me to use their room. So on all social media posts and everything I talk about, I have to say that. But they really were excited about what we have going on, and they gave me one of the big rooms. And so I'll be posting more stuff on social media about it. I can fit up to 100 people in the room. I'd really enjoy to have a large group of people that we can meet every single month and like really need to get involved with these monthly meetings to talk about theology. I think that's what's a big thing lacking in our area. A lot of us know about, like, for example, C.S. Lewis Institute. C.S. Lewis Institute in our area is a great asset. They have their monthly lectures, but you got to be a part of their program. It's not very well known because I don't want to say it's not popular, but it's like if there's a lot of us that know about it, but it's not known to enough people. So what I'm trying to do is trying to like get in between, like, so there are the people that are involved with churches and they're discipling one another, and then there's the people that are just up and coming and don't know where to go. I'm trying to be that guy that's in the middle. I want to offer classes, and I want to offer resources, and I want to offer things to sort of bridge the gap. And doing these monthly lectures, I think, will be a good idea. I think it'll be a good way to start. So again, February 7th, 6:30 to 8 p.m., Boardman Library. We will be doing our monthly lecture series, starting with the five solas and why the Reformation is not over. If you want more information about that, pay attention to social media. There'll be more stuff coming. So with that being said, tonight I have a couple of topics planned. We'll be talking about the book of Titus. So I have, we have like 5 guests scheduled for the next couple of weeks. I had a guest that was in the works for tonight. I will not say his name. Didn't end up working out for whatever reason, communication and stuff like that. So I had a backup planned, and tonight I thought it would be great to talk about. I started studying Titus. I actually taught through it a while ago. But kind of with what everything's been going on lately, I just started reading it again and tracing some of the themes that run throughout the book of Titus. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about that. I have 3 main points that I want to talk about tonight with the book of Titus. But for the beginning of our episode, after the beginning of our episode, because we always talk about business, I want to talk about 2019 and the reading plan and what we have going on for next year. I'm trying something new. So I am shooting for a goal of 60 books next year, and I know and this is not me like trying to boast or anything like that, but I know to some of you 60 books might sound like, how in the world. 60 books is really not that much to me. You know, for a seminary class, for example, I'm reading in an 8-week period 3 books, 4 books, and I have 3 classes typically every 8 weeks. So to get through 60 books, that's just over a book a week, and that's really not a problem. Yes, thank you, Miss Robbie. The views and opinions expressed on Theology Units are not necessarily those of the staff or management of the Boardman Library. And she was really nice to me about it, but she was very emphatic as she was telling me these things. Like, you have to put these on all of your posts. So, again, Boardman Library, their views are not my views. They're not my opinions. They're not their opinions. Anyways, 2019 reading plan. I am trying for 60 books. Again, 60 books is like, if you can... I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but it's really not that much. And I'm not talking about, like, you got to read, like, a 7,000-page book every week, and you're going to end up reading, like, 14.2 million pages next year. Like, just set aside intentional time. If you look at the post that I put up from Crossway, Crossway did this really cool article, this infograph, about like how much time does it take to read specific sections of the New Testament and Old Testament, and how much time does it take to read the Bible as a whole. And it was really, really interesting to look at and see where our time goes. I waste a lot of time. Listen, like, I have no problem being transparent. I waste a lot of time. So moving into 2019, I actually am going to try something new. So right here, this is my main desk, my computer. I have laptop, I have a monitor, I have my phone, this is my studio setup right here. But then over on this side, I have another desk, and right now I have like 30 books on that desk. And so what I actually plan on doing for 2019, I want to get all of the books that I want to work through, and I want to stick to that plan. A lot of times what happens is for example, I'm studying covenant theology. I have like 9 books right now that I'm reading in covenant theology. So that's like one section of what I'm studying is just covenant theology. But then I have like all these other books that I'm like, oh, I didn't even know I owned that book. Let me start reading that, and I'm going to read 3 chapters of it and never touch it again. My goal for 2019 is these are the 60 books that I'm reading. I'm not adding a new one to it. Now this is outside of my seminary classes, but the 60 books that I want to read, I want to pick, and I want to commit to reading these books, because a lot of times what happens is I buy a lot of books. A lot of you know that, but I buy a lot of books, and so what happens is I'll add a book to the list, and then I end up there's a lot of books that I really want to read. So I really want to be, I'm saying all this for a reason, but I really want to be committed to next year reading 60 books. I think that's an achievable goal for me this year. I don't really know the exact amount because I got lazy in my tracking. I know I hit at least 40, 45, maybe 50. I'm going to count and see, but 60 books, again, is not that. I know it sounds like a lot of books, but for me, it's really not a lot of books. So if you are interested, I'm saying all this to say this. If you're interested in really committing to a reading plan next year, send me a message, because I have a lot of resources that I could give you that will help you to stay on track. Like really what you have to do is you have to be sort of statistical about it. If you break it down, like, okay, so I want to read, let's say, set something small. I want to read 20 books next year. I will help you to get to that goal and tell you how much you have to read per day in order to get to that goal. I think it's a good way to start next year if you are interested in starting some sort of a resolution. I think setting a book goal is a good way to do that. And speaking of books, one thing I want to say before I start talking about Titus, because I've rambled now for what feels like 22 minutes, but we didn't start till late. So if you remember, I got this New International Greek Testament Commentary, Book of Revelation by G.K. Beale. And you remember I was so excited to get it that I did a video on the unboxing. If you have not seen, I want to show you, and I want to welcome to the family. Look at this guy. So you're thinking to yourself, well, that's the same exact book you just showed me. You are correct. It is the same exact book, but there is a big difference. This book right here, I hope you can hear that, is hardcover. And the hardcover edition is very, very hard to find in good condition, and it's very, very hard to find at a good price. So, for example, if you are going to look for that book right now on Amazon or on eBay, I think the cheapest I found was $80 for the book, and that's an acceptable condition. Not even like okay condition, like acceptable is $80. Now, me being the book buying guy that I am, acceptable is not the type of book that you want to buy. Like that, there's a lot of books that I get if they're used and they have, underlining and highlighting in them. I don't really care about that. I have no problem with that. I really actually enjoy getting somebody's book that has all those markings in it because it helps me to understand where they're coming from, and maybe they can pick up stuff that I don't necessarily see. I got a set of commentaries from a guy once, and he was so meticulous about taking notes that it just like really inspired me to do better. So I don't mind about highlights and notes and stuff like that. But if you buy a book that is acceptable condition, that means it's pretty beat up. And for $80, an acceptable book, I mean, not good. Anyways, I found the hardcover edition. I got it for $25. And it's basically brand new. I mean, it's not brand new, but it's basically brand new. So now I have the paperback and I have the hardcover. G.K. Beale is my, not just because he was on the show. I love G.K. Beale. I actually sent him an email with the picture of me that I posted on Facebook from the other day of me holding both the commentaries. He emailed me back. He did not seem that impressed. But anyways, so I'm just saying that because if you're really interested in a resource, just do the time, like do the investigation. You'll find it. Just put it on your list. Keep an eye out for it. You'll find it. So I'm happy to report that I have the paperback and the hardcover edition of the Revelation commentary. So we have 3 things from the book of Titus now that we are way behind schedule. 3 things. Again, I make no promises that we're only going to be at 3 things, but I know for sure that there are 3 things in the book of Titus. 3 things. 1, we're going to talk about, so let me put it up on the screen here real quick. Number 1, where am I? Okay, first part. The reason why Paul wrote the letter, in verse 1, he says, Paul, a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, for the sake of the faith of God's elect and their knowledge of the truth which accords with godliness. Number 2 is verse 13. Therefore, this testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, and declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. And then lastly, from death to life, chapter 3, verse 3 through 5. For we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, hated by others and hating one another. But when the goodness and loving kindness of God our Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his own mercy, by the washing of regeneration and renewal of the Holy Spirit. All right, let's roll. So the first part, for the sake of the faith of God's elect. Why is this important? Why did I add this as one of my 3 things that I wanted to talk about? So I think it's important to recognize what Paul, like the reason why he is writing, okay? Here's what I think is going on. I think a big thing that's going on inside the Christian church today is that we have almost, as followers of Christ, we have almost forgotten the fact that it is okay to take care of other Christians. That let me spread that out. Let me play that out a little bit farther. The church model, and I certainly don't mean to say that like this is every church in America or this is, the church model in America has become very seeker sensitive. It has become, let's appeal to the unbeliever. Let's make our system of church cool in order that we might bring in people. Now, I certainly am not saying that we don't want to bring in outsiders to the church. That's not at all what I have in mind. What I do have in mind, though, is that church should be geared towards the believer, okay? Now, I also am not saying that if an unbeliever comes to your church, I'm not saying that that unbeliever should sit in the seats and never hear about the gospel of Christ. That's definitely not, because I think every sermon that we preach, it should contain the good news of Christ, that he died on the cross for us, that he rose again, that he paid the penalty of sin for us, and that we could not do this on our own, and he had to do this for us. I'm certainly not saying that we should not mention that. However, the lean or the bend of our message on Sunday mornings should be towards the believer. And Paul here, he kind of reminds us of that, because what does he say? He says he is a servant of God, he's apostle of Jesus Christ for the sake of the faith of God's elect and their knowledge of the truth which accords with godliness. Now, I am not going to get into a big discussion about God's elect. I'm not going to do any of that. But however, I am going to say that clearly the message that Paul is trying to portray here is that he is concerned with edifying the believers. He is concerned with growing their knowledge. Now, again, he's focused on the Gentile. He's focused on grafting them in, as he says. He wants to proclaim the gospel, and of all the people that we can look at throughout history, I mean, he was one of the ones that was most obedient with carrying the gospel throughout the nations. But when you see a statement like this, it says, Paul, a servant of God and an apostle of Jesus Christ, for, why is he these things? The sake of the faith of God's elect and their knowledge of the truth, which accords with godliness. So, the reason why I led with that is because I think we need to remember that it is okay to take care of fellow believers. I think what we have done is we have elevated this new system of church that is so concerned with the new believer, that is so concerned with those that are in the world, that there is a lot of people sitting in the pews that really want to be discipled and they really want to grow in their knowledge, and they're kind of looking around and going, where am I going to get that from? Because it's certainly not this church here. Again, this is not every single church is doing this. I'm just saying, it doesn't take long to look and see what's going on, and I think a lot of us would agree that this is a very popular thing that's going on right now, is that this new model of church has become so geared towards appealing to the culture. We have to remember that it's okay to take care of the people that are in the seats that are already believers. That's what Paul reminds us here. Number 2. Now, this is going to be a little bit of an interesting topic here. Number 2, verse 13, this testimony is true, therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. And then in verse 15, declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority, let no one disregard you. Okay, so the main thing here is this rebuke, okay? Now, there is a lot of debate over what it means to actually rebuke someone. And how do you do that in a manner that is both love and grace, but it is also truth and a bit of emphasis on what's going on here. You can't love someone effectively if you're not telling them the truth about what is going on in their life. Do we get that? We have to remember what Paul is writing to Titus here. Paul is writing to Titus because he's telling them to put into place elders, that they are setting up this church here. He says in chapter 1, he says, this is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. So the idea that we have here in the book of Titus is that they are beginning this church. And there's something going on here that causes Paul to say, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith. Now, let me flip over screens here real quick. So this term rebuke, okay? Now, there's a couple different ways that we can look at this term rebuke, but the easiest way to look at it is this over here. I'm not sure if it's on the screen yet. Yeah, it's not on the screen yet. Let me move it real quick. Is it on the screen yet? No, it won't move over. I had this whole thing planned out. Okay. The term rebuke here, it means to reprove or to expose, or to convict. That's this in both of these verses. This term rebuke it carries this sense of like you need to do this right now. Paul's not necessarily concerned with like, hey, listen, give it a little bit of time. Let's see what happens. Become friends with them. Try to iron things out. Like, he's not concerned with that. His message, he uses this term. Let's see here. There's 4 different times. Like in 1 Timothy, he tells Timothy, he says, as for those who persist in sin, rebuke them in the presence of all. He says in Titus 1:9, he must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine, and also to rebuke those who contradict it. In verse 13, he says, therefore, rebuke them sharply. He says in verse 15 of chapter 2, declare these things and exhort, rebuke with all authority, let no one disregard you. So I think what's going on here, and I'm not going to, I'm only touching on this for a moment because this is one of the main themes of the book of Titus, but we have to kind of remember that there's some tough things that goes on with being a follower of Christ. What I mean by that is, like, listen, like, it's very common to throw out this term, like, well, like, you just need to love, and you just need to show love towards one another, and you just need to love, and you just need to love like Jesus. And yeah, I get that, but you can't separate, like, that term love, it actually carries like a couple of things with it. You can't separate like loving somebody that is in sin. Like, you can't just like pat them on the back and say it's all right, like, because technically to love that person effectively, you've got to call them out on the sin that they are living in order to effectively love them. You've actually got to rebuke them, like Paul says in here. There is a sense of urgency. There is a sense of, like, listen, like, you can't wait for, if you see somebody acting in a manner that is contrary to the gospel, you have got to rebuke them. Now, and a lot of times we think this term rebuke, it's very negative, and there are some people that make this term to be very negative, absolutely. But this term rebuke, it actually just means to, like, confront somebody. To explain to them the error in what they are teaching or in the way that they are living, in order that they might be restored from that error and they might follow Christ in a manner of truth. And then lastly, let's look at chapter 3, verse 3 through 5. Chapter 3, verse 3 through 5. Okay, sorry. I thought something was unplugged. Chapter 3, verse 3. For we ourselves were once foolish, disobedient, led astray, slaves to various passions and pleasures, passing our days in malice and envy, hated by others and hating one another. But when the goodness and loving kindness of God our Savior appeared, he saved us not because of works done by us in righteousness, but according to his own mercy, by the washing of regeneration and renewal of the Holy Spirit. Okay, real quick. I'll define sharply. Okay, let me get back up. Sharply. Okay, so here's sharply. Sharply is severely, actually, is what this term means here. So it carries this sense of you got to do it right now, no matter how hard the conversation might be. There's a sense of, like, it's going to be a tough conversation, but you need to get it done. And so sharply is in a manner of, like, listen, like, don't try to, like, paint the picture that, like, things are going to be okay, but do it in a sense that the point of what you are trying to say comes across as urgent. That you don't want to skate around the answer, but sharply means, like, listen, like, the message that you proclaim to them cuts right to them in a manner that they cannot deny what you are trying to tell them, that they have no doubt what they're trying to understand from you. That's the idea of sharply. But lastly, from death to life, chapter 3, verse 3 through 5. I think this is kind of like summarizes what all we are trying to say with this section. We talk about rebuke. We talk about, does it refer to time or harshness? I think it refers to harshness. Actually, it'll refer to a little bit of both. This term sharply, which is what this term actually is only used in this verse. There is also this verse that the word can be translated as severe. But right here in Titus chapter 2, it's actually just translated as sharply, meaning a sense of urgency. So I think you could actually refer to it as time and harshness. More so harshness, I think. But again, like Paul's overall message, and even like all the New Testament writers, is that like listen, like right now is the time for salvation. Like we are living in the end times. So any message that we proclaim carries with it the sense of urgency in relation to the time. So the harshness, I think, because of the understanding of this time, the harshness also needs to be there. Like, listen, like you are running out of time, and therefore, because I have to love you effectively, I have to be severe with you, and I have to be emphatic with you, and again, I have to be harsh with you and explain what is going on. But Paul says in chapter 3, for we ourselves were once foolish. So he reminds us that we were at one time. Now, this is where we get the love aspect of it. He reminds us at one time we were these things. He says we were once foolish, we were disobedient, we were led astray, we were slaves to various passions and pleasures, we were passing our days in malice and envy and hated by others and hating one another. So as he tells us to rebuke the people that are teaching a false message, he also reminds us that, like, hey, listen, you were this way at one time. And so how would you want someone to approach you when you were being rebuked for those very things that you're about to rebuke somebody for? That's how all of these things get tied together, because I think what happens is we often forget that we were, like 1 Corinthians 6 says, but we used to be one of these things, but now we were washed, we were sanctified, we were set apart. And so I think the message that Paul is trying to say here is that, like, listen, like, you once were one of these things. Remember that as you are rebuking someone else, because you at one time were being rebuked for the very same thing that you were going to rebuke this person about. And you certainly would want to have rebuke done in a manner that is respectful and hospitable, a manner of grace and a manner of love. But you also need to remember that it needs to be done, that we can't avoid these type of conversations because, as hard as they might be, you have to have these tough conversations with somebody because, again, you can't love someone effectively if you are not going to rebuke them for error. And I'm not talking about, like, listen, like you might have a different view of baptism. I'm talking about, like, you are living in sin, or you are teaching something that is completely false, or you are not standing up for the truthfulness of Scripture. That's what's going on here in this section of Titus. That's what the main theological theme of Titus is that there is something major going on with the teaching. So again, the three main points that we had tonight: the sake of the faith of God's elect, rebuking them sharply in a manner of grace and in love, and remembering that we at one time were those people that we are rebuking, and therefore we need to show them love and we need to show them care. We need to understand that at one time we were the same exact way. We would want that same care given to us as we are showing gentleness and respect. Good point. We'll end with that. So next Friday we are back 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Hope you are able to join us throughout the week. We will have articles posted. We will have social media posts. We have all kinds of stuff going on this week. Make sure you subscribe to all of our channels, facebook.com/Theology Nights, youtube.com/Theology Nights for more content. Any questions, comments, go to theologynights.com and enter them in the box on the main page. I look forward to interacting with you guys each and every Friday night, and then starting January 8th, every Tuesday night. Have a wonderful weekend. Merry Christmas, guys. Thank you.